And hello and welcome to Newsmax Now. I'm John Bachman. We begin tonight with the continued fallout from the U.S. Embassy siege in Iraq. Tonight, a new warning from the Pentagon that more attacks could soon be on the horizon. We also have some new images that you see right here that show the destruction at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. These pictures taken right after it was breached by Iranian-backed insurgents and their supporters. Today, Defense Secretary Mark Esper said Iran and its proxy forces may be planning further strikes on American interests in the Middle East. All right, let's continue this discussion now. We want to welcome in Advisory Board Co-Chair for Veterans for Trump, Jessie Jane Duff, also a retired Marine Gunnery Sergeant. Jessie Jane, great to see you again. Happy New Year. Also with us this night, we have Sam Nunberg with us, a former advisor to both the Trump campaign and the Romney campaigns in 2012. Sam, great to see you as well. Let's start with you, Jessie, and let's talk more about President Trump's response to this attack. Here he was on New Year's Eve. Let's take a listen.
I think it's been handled very well. The Marines came in. We had some great warriors come in and do a fantastic job, and they were there instantaneously as soon as we heard. This will not be a Benghazi. Benghazi should never have happened. This will never, ever be a Benghazi.
Also, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham weighing in on Twitter, quote, President Trump is determined to protect American personnel and expects our Iraqi partners to step up to the plate. No more Benghazis. Meanwhile, while the attack was still in progress, MSNBC anchor Joy Reid was drawing comparisons to the fatal attack in Libya that killed Ambassador Chris Stevens, Sean Smith, Glenn Doherty, and Tyrone Woods. Reid was quick to label the U.S. Embassy attack in in Baghdad, Trump's Benghazi. And then there was this taunting of President Trump from a progressive group called Vote Vets. Hey, POTUS, remember your Benghazi rants during 2016? You're about, unfortunately, in Iraq. Jessie Jane, it's almost as if these folks were rooting for more American lives to be lost.
You know, it's pretty despicable when we see a vets group that does not care for the president advocate against the president when it's costing American lives. Those are Marines in that embassy. There were Marines that were sent in. I take that very personal. Under no president do I want to see American lives lost. When Ambassador Stevens was dragged through the streets, when he was tortured and killed, I actually cried. It didn't matter who the president of the United States was, if I supported him or not. That man served his country as an ambassador representing us. And the 4 men that died, I happen to know one of the widows, Tyrone Woods' widow, Dorothy Woods. You know, these are people that really have gone to serve their country with the best intentions at heart, and then to be murdered and slaughtered in Benghazi, and for these reporters or a vets group to mock it and make fun of it as if they're poking at the president tells me that their priorities are highly displaced. We should never want to see a Benghazi of any sort anywhere ever again.
No, and that's clear from the response that we saw here, Sam. Much different response than waiting hours and hours and hours to actually send some backup support. But, you know, what did you think of, was that your interpretation when you see Joy Reid's tweet, when you see this tweet from Vote Vets, that they were almost rooting for another Benghazi-style tragedy to take place?
When you see that these Democrats and their commentators in the mainstream media start to immediately compare this to a Benghazi, the reason being is, one, that they knew that that was a tremendous failure by Barack Obama, which, oh, by the way, they covered for him famously in that last debate against Mitt Romney. Number two, because they want this president to fail at all costs. When you watch the other stations, when you go on the other networks or the websites, you see that they're talking about a recession coming next year, which no indication could show you. The fact of the matter is this president, and thank God that he was elected, has shown moral clarity when it comes to the biggest pariah nation, the largest terrorist sponsor in the world, and frankly, the country that has the most American blood on its hand out of any country since the 1980s, including in the war in Iraq, and that would be Iran. They're an economic basket case thanks to this president, thanks to the clarity he showed in leaving the Iranian deal, which his predecessor left him, probably the worst deal ever negotiated from a position of weakness. And by the time this president leaves office 5 years from now, you will see that this Iranian regime will no longer be in power.
That's a bold prediction, Sam.
Well, look at what's happening, John. Yeah. Look at on the streets in Iran. There are massive protests. The mainstream media doesn't want to cover it at all. What you have is you've seen that when they got their money from Barack Obama, the Iranians, they spread it across the Middle East, even to Sunni terrorists. They're a Shia country.
And that's what we're seeing. And we talked about this with Fred, right? We see this, Jesse, in the backlash from the Iraqi people, from the Lebanese people, from people elsewhere in the Middle East. They know that the influence that is coming in their own countries, their homelands, is coming from Iran, and they don't like that.
Yes, Iranian-backed Hezbollah is really such a horrible group because they are responsible for over 200 Marines being bombed in Lebanon in 1983. I remember it very vividly. And the president came out. At that time, it was Ronald Reagan, and said, we will never have terrorism like this again, or we must address those enemies. And here we are having this conversation still. Iranian-backed Hezbollah has blood on their hands for many, many decades now. And Iran has been amok for over 40 years. We're looking at a situation now where they're back in the Shia in Iraq, but as you say, they're funneling money also to Sunni, because at that point, it doesn't matter now to them as long as the U.S. is what unites Sunni and Shia when it comes to hatred, when it comes to the terrorist groups, I should say. Not all Sunni and not all Shia despise the United States.
You see these, we're showing these pictures
that.
now.
But these terrorist groups.
We see these pictures of the yellow and the green flags. Those are the Hezbollah flags. When you see those around these Middle Eastern countries, that's the Iranian influence and other places, and that's what we're keeping our eye out for.